I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, you have before you a copy of the modified written agenda. Are there any proposed changes to the agenda as written? Any proposed changes to the agenda as written?
Mr. Mayor, I'd move that we put all personnel items on consent.
All right. The proposed revision from Alderman Dumas is to place items 11I1 through 5 on the consent agenda. Those items are as follows. The authorization to promote Donnie Scales to fill the vacant position of equipment operator in new construction rehab of public services as presented. The authorization to hire Kenneth L. Rogers to fill the vacant position of operator in landscape of sanitation and environmental services. The authorization to advertise to fill the vacant position of maintenance worker in the street department, and the authorization to advertise for firefighter for the fire department, all as presented. Alderman Dumas, is that your proposed revision?
It is.
Do I hear any objection to that proposed revision? Any objection? Any objection? Any objection? Seeing none, those matters will be placed on the consent agenda. Alderman Dumas, you have further proposed revisions?
I do. Under board business item D, to consent, with that being Ruth Morgan.
Proposed revision from Alderman Dumas is to place item 10D, the appointment of Ruth Morgan to the vacant position on the Oktibbeha County Heritage Museum with the current term ending 9/30/2015 on the consent agenda. Alderman Dumas, is that your proposed revision?
It is.
Do I hear any objection? Any objection? Any objection? Any objection? Seeing none, that matter's been placed on the consent agenda. Alderman Dumas, you have further proposed revisions?
Under finance and administration, item 2, the newly added claims docket, except that we have a disregard that. And then finally, the minutes. I don't know if the city attorney has any comments.
I do have a copy of the September 26 minutes as corrected to Mr. Adams, and the October 2nd minutes are ready for board approval.
Well, I move both of those to consent with those corrections.
All right, proposed revision from Alderman Dumas is to place item 4A and B on the consent agenda. The first matter being the approval of the minutes of the September 26, 2012 recess meeting of the Board of Alderman of the City of Starkville as corrected by the city attorney. The second matter being the approval of the minutes of the October 2nd, 2012 regular meeting of the Board of Alderman of the City of Starkville as presented on the consent agenda. Alderman Dumas, is that your proposed revision?
It is.
Do I hear any objection?
I don't have any objections, just I want to know what the clarification is of the corrections that you had were.
Sure. Can I hand that draft?
Absolutely.
Alderman Carver, I made 3 proposed corrections. In item number 3, a name was listed as Jeremiah Sistrunk. Obviously, that's Jeremiah Dumas. In item number 4, the motion was listed as to recess, but the motion was actually to adjourn that meeting. And also in item 4, the motion was to reconvene at a recess meeting of October 2nd, and that was actually the regular meeting of October 2nd. And those are the 3 proposed corrections.
Okay, thank you.
Any objection to Alderman Dumas's proposed revision? Any objection? Any objection? Any objection? Seeing none, those matters have been placed on the consent agenda. Alderman Dumas, do you have further proposed revisions?
I do not.
Are there any further proposed revisions from the members of the board? Any further proposed revisions? Any further proposed revisions? Seeing none, a motion to approve the agenda as revised is in order.
So moved.
Motion has been made by Alderman Corey to approve the agenda as revised. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Motion has been seconded by Alderman Dumas. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please signify by saying nay. Measure clearly passes. The agenda is approved. The next matter you have before you is the approval of the consent agenda. Is there any objection to the approval of the consent agenda as revised? Any objection? Any objection? Any objection? Seeing none, the consent agenda as revised has been approved. The next matter before you are announcements and comments by the mayor and board, and I have one scheduled comment this evening and one unscheduled comment this evening. First is introduction of our newest member of the Starkville workforce, and that is Scott Lomax, our newest police officer. It is my pleasure to welcome Scott Lomax to the Starkville Police Department. Scott has spent the majority of his life in Starkville. He moved to Sandhill, Mississippi, where he graduated from Pisgah High School. He attended Mississippi College, where he majored in accounting. Before joining the Starkville Police Department, Scott worked as a police officer for University Medical Center in Jackson. Scott is the son of Vicki Brown and the late Johnny Lomax. He has one brother named Justin. When Scott isn't working, he enjoys hunting, shooting, and skydiving. Please join me in welcoming Scott. And my next comment I make with a heavy heart this evening. Some of you may have read in the newspaper, Ben Griffith is leaving us after 6 years. Ben, are you here this evening? I ask that you stand up for just a second. Just would be remiss if I didn't mention at Ben's last board meeting how much Ben has meant to the city of Starkville the last 6 years. He has served officially as our planner. But I will tell you, there is probably nobody in city government in Starkville that has worn more hats than Ben has. In fact, he has worn every hat he's been asked to wear proudly, and he's done it well. Over the years, he's served the Historic Preservation Commission. He's worked countless hours with the Planning and Zoning Commission in his capacity as planner. He, in the past, has served as our ADA coordinator. And most recently, we recognize Ben for the accomplishment of getting Starkville certified as a certified floodplain community. That is something he did in his capacity as a floodplain manager for the city. And if this all seems like a lot, it is. I can tell you there have been many times when I've come through City Hall in the evening or on a weekend, and I've seen Ben's car as the lone car in our parking lot. He works long hours because he cares very deeply about this city. Ben, I just want you to know that we're very, very appreciative for the 6 years you spent in Starkville, and we are better for it. Thank you. That is all the comments I have for this evening. Are there any comments by the members of the board? Do we have any comments from the members of the board?
Mayor, I just wanted to point out real quickly, we have our August sales tax revenues in, and December of 2011 was our first ever to reach 500,000 in sales tax revenues, which is 508, which you would expect December to be a big month, but August was our first ever, I guess, non-Christmas season. The month of August, our sales tax revenues were 500,299,000. So I think that's a really, really positive thing for the city of Starkville that we're still continuing to grow. That's it.
Any further comments from the members of the board?
If I can tag on to that, we're already averaging more than we averaged last year, and we have our higher collection months coming up still in this year, so things do look very positive on the sales tax front.
Y'all keep spending money. Any further comments? Any further comments? Seeing none, we'll move to citizen comments. At this time, any citizen wishing to make comments this evening may do so by coming forward, introducing yourself, and you'll be recognized to speak for a maximum of 3 minutes. In this process, I don't direct traffic a bunch. I know we've got more people than normal that have come to speak tonight. So I would just ask that you kind of monitor yourself. If you see somebody else getting up to speak, yield to the person who's closest at the podium, and then you'll get your turn after them. And please do state your name clearly so that the clerk can get it for the record.
Good evening to the mayor and board. My name is Alvin Turner, Ward 7. Want to recognize Vice Mayor Sistrunk and Alderman Vaughn.
Thank you, Alvin.
Mr. Turner.
The Turner family want to thank y'all for getting us through the death of my auntie of 91 years. We only have one more auntie, and she have had a stroke. So continue to pray for the Turner family. Citizens, we have a situation on North Lane and West Side. We have a bulldog that has white face and brown body. It's frightening everyone that's on that side of town. Don't know whether the owner or who he ever belongs to. Know that we have a dangerous dog ordinance, but the people are afraid to come outside because they don't want to get between the house and him. The citizens also would like to that's about it.
Thank you, Mr. Turner.
My name is Marilyn Grafe, and I am a resident of Green Oaks, and I have 4 points that I wish to address. First, what happens to the property underlying the street, closing at the beginning of the street closing? Mississippi Code 1970, Section 17, 123, page 39. If any easement dedicated pursuant to the provisions of this section for a street, road, alley, or other public purpose is determined to be not needed for the public purpose, the easement may be declared abandoned. And ownership of the fee underlying the easement shall revert to the adjoining property owner or owners at the time of abandonment. Here, the land underlying the electronic gate at the end of Douglas MacArthur Drive reverted to the adjoining property owners at time of closure. Second, can the city reopen the street? Mississippi Code, Section 11, 27-1, page 405. City may reopen street it has chosen to close. Only requirement is that city reopen street through process of eminent domain, as opposed to use of ordinance rescinding order closing street. City of Jackson versus McAllister. Note that the process of condemnation is a formal one involving a court of eminent domain and appropriate timely notices. It requires compensation of the property owners and can only be done upon showing of public necessity. Third, who has the burden of proof of public necessity, the city or the property owners? Mississippi Code 11-27-15, page 422. The condemned or city, rather than the landowner, had the burden of proving that the landowner's property was being taken for public use. Here, the city cannot meet its burden because, as Dr. Scarborough showed through a videotape at the last meeting, the gate at the end of Douglas MacArthur Drive operates correctly. Fourth, does the Mississippi Code allow a city to conditionally close the street, reserving the right to re-enter and reopen it at a later date? Mississippi Code 1906, incorporated by case law into the Code of 1970.
Ms. Grafe, your time's expired. If you can, just wrap it up real quick.
Yes, I will. Here, the leaving of a gate at the end of Douglas MacArthur Drive did not empower the city to enter at a later date and reopen the street without using the doctrine of eminent domain. Mississippi Code.
Thank you, Ms. Grafe.
Thank you.
Further citizen comment?
My name is David Hoffman. I live at 2405 MacArthur Drive in Green Oaks as well. This is my second time giving a comment here. The first time I tried to appeal to emotion, and that clearly did not work for those who voted in favor of what the mayor, I think, has correctly vetoed. So I'm asking you to please follow the mayor's veto, and these are the reasons why. One, looking through the ordinance, what was passed, I think most of the facts that were laid out here were not proven, or were patently false. So when we're talking about opening up new alternative routes, there's no evidence that that actually alleviates the issue of traffic coming through Green Oaks. When we're talking about the fact that the gate is a hardship for emergency workers, that's also been proven patently false by video evidence. Also talking about the city's best interest being that there's egress and ingress from multiple locations. My suggestion to you is that this is inconsistent policy. You're applying this in Green Oaks, but you're not applying this elsewhere, in other subdivisions. And that it's for the 3 points of entry or exit are, that's better for the citizens, the 400 residents within Green Oaks, that's actually better for us, and that's also not shown. I would want to remind us that at the end of that meeting about a month ago, the discussion was about bad policy, that it's bad policy to have streets closed. But I would remind the alderman here that there's a number of layers of bad policy going on by removing that gate. And there's a couple of, three of them actually. One is that it's a top-down policy that you're ignoring obvious, overwhelming citizen commentary coming towards you about what the residents of Green Oaks want. So a top-down policy that ignores fact, that is problematic to me. Two, that it actually negates a policy that you're implementing in terms of safe routes to school. You've opened up the Whitfield sidewalk to create a safe route to school for children from that neighborhood. If you open up that gate by overriding the mayor's veto, you're actually then being inconsistent with your policy, because then you're going to be sending children down streets that are unsafe to get to a safe route to school. So the last thing is that this is inconsistent policy. This is not being applied across all neighborhoods and all of Starkville. If you're going to apply this in Green Oaks, I would like to see the city plans that are being developed for all of the other subdivisions in Starkville. Thank you.
Thank you. Further citizen comments?
I'm Chuck Scarborough. I live at 2305 MacArthur Drive in Green Oaks. I'm president of the Green Oaks Homeowners Association. Okay, as was pointed out last time, there's at least 18 subdivisions with no through streets. So you can tell that by just looking at the city map. So the volume of cut-through traffic with the attendant safety issues will destroy the subdivision and our way of life. What kind of city do we live in that would destroy an entire subdivision? Now, opening up MacArthur will set a precedent. Maple and Redbud will be next. The losses in property value to the residents of Green Oaks will be in the millions of dollars. Is the city going to reimburse us for these losses? Also, reopening Redbud, MacArthur, this amounts to a rezoning, a de facto rezoning, without going through the Planning and Zoning Commission. And it was decided in 1215 at Runnymede that the sovereign had to obey its own laws. That was the Magna Carta. Okay, I think everything else has been satisfactorily covered, and I beg you, make it a 7-0 vote in favor of the mayor's veto. Don't destroy our life. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Scarborough. Further citizen comments? Do we have any further citizen comments this evening? Any further citizen comments? Any further citizen comments? Seeing none, we will move to public appearances. And we have one public appearance scheduled this evening. That is the annual report by Dr. Jerry Emerson on the activities of the Planning and Zoning Commission. Dr. Emerson, you will have 10 minutes to make your presentation, and I ask that you remain for questions and comments by the members of the board.
Okay. Mr. Mayor, members of the board, it's a pleasure to be here. Appreciate you all taking the time. I can assure you I will not take my entire 10 minutes, so I'll give some time back to you all. You all received in your packet a set of information that Ben Griffith had drawn up summarizing the Planning and Zoning Commission's activities, and the P&Z Commission looked at this at our meeting last week and concurred with it. A couple of things I would point out to the Commission. First is that the Planning and Zoning Commission and the Board of Aldermen appear to be in complete concord on land use decisions that are reflected in this package, with one exception, and that was the action on Rock Hill Road, in which the Planning and Zoning Commission recommended denial, and the board approved it with a reduction in acreage. I think I can accurately characterize my colleagues' views that had we known that we had the latitude to reduce the zoning request, we would have done so and would have been aligned with your actions. We did not become aware that we had the latitude to contract the zoning area to something smaller than, I believe it was 6 acres, which you all did. And so, other than that, everything else that you see here reflects a matchup between the P&Z Commission and the board's activities. I would like to add, on behalf of my colleagues on the Planning and Zoning Commission, as well as myself, the thanks that I have, that we have, for Ben Griffith's service over the past 6 years. His work has been exemplary. In this age in which people criticize public servants and say all sorts of things about them, Ben is an example of the dedication and the professionalism that is attendant with so many public servants. He has been capable, he's been hardworking, and most amazingly through all of this, he has been affable. And on the behalf of my colleagues, I would like to extend Ben my personal and professional thanks for his assistance in helping the P&Z Commission discharge its responsibilities. And I will stop at that point, Mr. Mayor, and we'll look forward to any questions that the board may have.
Do we have any questions or comments for Dr. Emerson from the members of the board? Any questions or comments for Dr. Emerson? Any questions or comments?
I'd just like to say that we as a board appreciate what y'all do to help us with what can be very complicated matters, and the guidance that you provide us is appreciated. If you could please pass that along to the board.
Yes, ma'am, I will do so.
Ditto. Thank you, Dr. Emerson.
Okay, thank you all.
The next matter you have before you is the consideration of a memorandum of understanding with Brickfire for repayment of funds owing to the Mississippi Department of Human Services. This is the $7,000 plus that Brickfire and Starkville have agreed to repay from a previous audit from 2 years ago on the grant from the Department of Human Services that passes through the city that goes to fund the Brickfire program. The memorandum of understanding lays out terms as follows. The city will make its $5,000 contribution to Brickfire as budgeted this year, and then in the 5 following months, Brickfire will repay the city $1,000 per month to go towards the city's repayment of the $7,000 owing, and that process will repeat again for the remaining $2,000 plus at the beginning of fiscal year 2014. Discussion. Alderman Deputy.
What have we done? Has there been any changes to ensure this does not happen again?
We've had clean audits since.
And have we paid them the $5,000 for this year?
We have not. That is part of this memorandum of understanding.
So then why are we asking for that back in installments versus taking the lump sum now?
Because conversations with Ms. Taylor led me to make this recommendation. It makes it easier on her from a cash flow perspective. This way the burden can be spread out over a period of 5 months rather than the burden hitting all at once.
Is there a penalty occurred or incurred because of a non-lump sum payment? I mean, there's
No, we'll be
interest
ahead of
or-
schedule. Our schedule is actually over a period of several years, $200 plus a month. Alderman Sistrunk.
I was taking Alderman Dumas's question to mean, is there any sort of penalty for Ms. Taylor, or how do we ensure that Ms. Taylor repays her since we are advancing her the $5,000 and she's going to pay that back monthly over a period of 5 months? What happens if she misses a payment?
Well, her organization is directly dependent upon our Department of Finance to make grant disbursements. And I would assume the remedy would be grant disbursements are not made until that's satisfied. Mr. Adams, if I stated that correctly?
Yes.
So if there's a payment missed, you will hold any subsequent grant distributions.
That's correct. Her allocations from DHS arrive in 12 monthly installments to be passed through to her. It's unrestricted capital. Yes, we would be able to withhold that payment.
And then the other comment that I have is that the arrangement that's made to pay back MDHS as part of this audit settlement is over 3 years, and it's a monthly check for 36 months. Does it make sense for us to do that, or does it make sense for us to just go ahead and repay a lot of record keeping to set up that ongoing payment?
No.
The city attorney and I discussed this, and Alderman Sistrunk, our original thought was, and between Ms. Sproul and me, our thought was that we would go ahead and pay the $7,699 up front and just avoid the administrative cost. But sort of after the three of us spoke, we felt it would be better to pay the $5,000 now. We'll make a lump sum for the $5,000 to DHS this year.
Okay.
But the remaining $2,600 will wait for the next budget
Okay.
year when we have Ms. Taylor on the line for that amount.
Okay, all right, that makes more sense than 36 payments.
Alderman Carver,
What exactly were the audit findings?
do you recall?
Maybe Mr.
I'll-
Latimer could answer that, because he
Sure.
was, I think, involved in that
Do you
pretty
recall?
extensively.
There was the allegation was that there was an inappropriate reporting of where the money went for the dollar amount at issue. A simple matter of not itemizing exactly how the money was spent by Brickfire.
Further discussion.
Do we need to, so does the Department of Finance have the authority without it being stated in this motion to withhold her payments until we receive her payment? Or does that need
Is
to be
that
expressed?
discretionary, or would you like that spoken to in a motion?
Well, sir, I'll take any support the board can give me on the issue, but my feeling is that so long as it would be nice to have that support in a motion.
Okay. Further discussion.
But if she missed it, we could then reaffirm it at another, rather than, I mean, can it be stated in that motion without changing the document that we have here?
Yeah, you could just state it in the motion and reference the document in the motion as well. Just state that would be the penalty, or that would be the remedy.
Well, I move approval, adding that any late payment will mean the docking of her payment in terms of her grant payments.
Alderman Dumas has made a motion to approve a memorandum of understanding with Afro-American Cultural Society, DBA Brickfire Project, for repayment of funds to the city of Starkville from a Mississippi Department of Human Services grant audit finding as presented. And the remedy for non-repayment of the city will be withholding of monthly grant disbursements from DHS. Alderman Dumas, is that your motion?
It is.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Motion's been seconded by Alderman Parker. Alderman Dumas, you wish to speak on the merits?
I do not.
Any discussion? Any discussion? Any discussion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please signify by saying nay.
Nay.
All those in favor, please signify by raising your hand. All those opposed, please signify by raising your hand. By a vote of 6 in favor with 1 against, this measure passes. The next matter before you is the consideration of the approval of an economic development services agreement with OCEDA, Oktibbeha County, the Greater Starkville Development Partnership, and the Columbus Lounge Development League. I have had the pleasure over the last 5 months to participate in conversations with other community leaders throughout Oktibbeha, Clay, and Lowndes counties about how we might be able to do economic development as a team in hopes that a rising tide lifts all boats. That process has been very enjoyable for me, seeing the leaders of our respective communities work together on a vision for the future that I am convinced holds very much promise for growth and development in all of our communities. Tonight, we have before us the contract that will allow us to take the first step towards what we hope in the future will be a one-stop shop for economic development in the Golden Triangle that will be second to none anywhere in the state of Mississippi. I'm going to let Joe Max Higgins do the heavy lifting for us this evening and describing exactly what this journey over the next 2 years would look like. And then we'll transition back into discussion on how this contract fits into it and how the city accomplishes that. Mr. Higgins?
Thank you, Mayor. And I'm gonna be conscious of your time and your heavy agenda. I'm not going to speed through this purposefully, but I do want to get through it. If you got a question, just raise your hand, say time out, slow down. Let's go back and look at that. Be happy to do that. We have worked for several weeks on this project. We started out with a white paper that we commissioned then Watkins, Ludlam, Stennis, now Jones Walker out of Jackson to help us with, and I'll just run through here. We had a steering committee made up of 2 representatives from Clay County, Robbie Robinson, retired chancery clerk there, Jackie Edwards, executive director of community counseling. Some of y'all may know Jackie. Representing Lowndes County, we had Gordon Flowers with Bernini Law Firm. We had Jim Alexander, who's a businessman and banker. Link chair and vice chair and chair, Jim Mack is. We had Mayor Wiseman, Mr. Jack Wallace with OCEDA, and Mr. Marvell Howard with the Board of Supervisors here representing Oktibbeha County and Starkville. Also, Chris Pace, I've already introduced the legal counsel. When we started this, we gave this committee a mission. We said, okay, we want to look at a regional organization. We want to look at formation, purpose, powers, governance and administration, funding, and even down to the implementation time schedule. I can tell you that I think everybody that served on that committee may have had thoughts about how this thing looked. And as we got in there and each team member started working, I'm not sure we would have come out with what we came out with if we'd have walked in and said, here's the deal. But as we walked through the process and met with y'all, other city councils, boards of supervisors, we got input in meetings with vice mayors and mayors, city councilmen, selectmen, and boards of supervisors, and a lot of the comments we got in those meetings have been incorporated in this plan. But this was the committee's original charge. Under formation, there were those out there that wanted to start this right now. Let's go, let's get a bill passed in January, and let's start this right now. Well, the practicality of it was right now was probably too quick. So what we determined was we need to do a phase 1 and a phase 2 on formation. Phase 1 was we'd do a temporary agreement, a 2-year agreement with Starkville, Oktibbeha County, the Greater Starkville Development Partnership. OCEDA is in there as well, and the link be very similar to the West Point agreement that we've already signed. We understand that in the meetings we understood that nobody from other towns want to be a member of the Columbus Lounge Development League, so it was recognized that we change our name to the Golden Triangle Development League, and that this duration would be 2 years, roughly from this October to September of 14, and during that time we would work towards the final end product, which is a permanent organization. That lets us get somebody on board representing Starkville and Oktibbeha County very, very quickly. We think as early as right after the first year, our headhunter tells us we could have somebody on board and hit the ground running. In phase 2, we propose to form the Golden Triangle Regional Development Authority. This would be done through local and private legislation. Nothing exists in Chris Pace's evaluation. Nothing exists in state law that let us do exactly what the steering committee wanted to do, which was fund fund economic development through a dedicated funding stream, as well as have a board that governed and a board that was authorized to do certain things. So we anticipate in phase 2 the introduction of a local and private bill, at not this session, but next January, and that would provide a portion of the funding for this. We also anticipate that the private sector must be engaged in this, and through that, it was determined that we would create a foundation that would represent the 3 Golden Triangle communities. That foundation would be equal representation from each of the 3 communities, and they would provide the private sector funding necessary to put the total funding together on this organization. I'll cover that in a little bit under the funding. Under the purpose and the powers, I'm not going to read these to y'all. They're on our website. I think most of you have a copy of this, but I think number 1 does merit some thought there. Speak with one voice on the region on economic development matters. Over the years, we've historically heard from our congressional delegation, from our state leaders. Boy, it would be nice if we were pushing with one foot up there instead of everybody trying to go in different directions regarding economic development and other things. So we put together what we think are reasonably acceptable goals by most people of what this organization would do. We think most people would agree, if not all people would agree, with virtually everything under the purpose and the powers. Under the governance administration, we've already covered a temporary agreement. That's what we're here to talk to you about tonight, followed by a permanent agreement in 2014. We, as a part of that, we've agreed to change the name, but we've also agreed to put representation on that board. 4 members on the board of directors, 2 members on the executive committee that run the day-to-day decisions of that would be Starkville, Oktibbeha County representatives. And if we move forward fairly shortly, we're going to need to know those 4 names and then identify those 2 people that will be serving on the executive committee. That's phase 1, governance and administration. Phase 2, and we've got 2 slides. This one may be confusing, but I hope what you'll see here is the overlap between the public and the private. Our proposal is for the Board of Supervisors in each county to appoint a board member. It's pretty simple. They appoint a board member representing that community. We also have the foundation appointing a board member from their paying members, from their folks that are a member of that. A person would be identified from each community to represent that community on that board. And then the middle one is positions that would be recommended by that board and ratified by that Board of Supervisors in that county. So in a way, the Board of Supervisors will have direct responsibility for naming one, and they'll have an indirect responsibility for naming another. The private sector will be engaged as well as the public sector will be engaged. This is probably a better line drawing that kind of shows how it would work. At the top, we have Oktibbeha County appoints a director, the Foundation Board appoints a director, and then the GTRA board, that 6-member board initially would nominate, and that nomination would be approved by that Board of Supervisors, giving you 3 members for each county, 9 members total. We think the terms initially are staggered. We've proposed that the Foundation Board members get a 6-year term. Those appointed by the Board of Supervisors, a 4-year term. Those appointed by the Board, a 2-year term. And to start the stagger, and then we can go from there. Ironically, one of the reasons the supervisors are for 4 years is they've got an election coming up fairly soon after this thing would go. And several of the supervisors said, why don't you do the Foundation Board for 6 years and let the new Board of Supervisors, whichever one that may be, appoint somebody for a full term. So if that seems a bit slanted, that was at the request of several of our supervisors from our communities. We've got rules in there for replacement and removal of directors, and then again a 9-member board, 3, 3, and 3. The funding. We've got some experience in doing this. We've been doing it a while. We've gone through a lot of work with West Point, adding them to the equation not too long ago, and we think the estimated budget for this organization will be somewhere around $2.3, $2.5 million a year. We believe that the public sector will fund about 70%, the private sector will fund about 30%, and to guarantee the public participation, part of the local and private we're looking at is the authority for that governmental entity to levy up to 2 mills to offset the cost of operation. 2 mills in Starkville, Oktibbeha County, 2 in Clay Lowndes, and 2 in West Point and Clay County. Now, folks, a mill is not the same, doesn't have the same value in every county. It's worth over $1 million in Lowndes. It's worth about $600,000 for 2 mills here, and it's worth about $250,000 in Clay County. And yes, we do recognize that there are three members from each community, and that each community is not paying the same amount of money. But it was determined that if we started doing the staggered, I don't think we would ever get the organization off the ground. So each community is doing its fair share as far as the millage goes, and then you've got the private sector. Now, there's been a lot of people that have asked about the millage. We had to run a sample budget. We had to run a sample budget with overhead, salaries, travel, all the things that you roll into a budget when you prepare it. In our mock budget, which also included a permanent office built in the GTRA area, I think our maximum millage was 1.72 mills. There's a very good chance that most of the communities, including y'all, would not be looking at that type of increase. It's a very good chance that in some communities they would actually be looking at no increase. They can find their funds, their money in different ways. But that's the trigger. That 2 mills determines what the community's pledge is, and it also gives us something that we know we can get. Annually, we would envision that board of directors would set down budget for the year in advance of the county levying the tax, and notify that board of supervisors for that county how much money they thought they were going to need, very similar to how the county school districts operate today. And then the foundation would be proportionate. There's been some discussion of whether the foundation board would be 9, 12, 15, 19, and multiples of 3. I think somewhere between probably 12 and 18 board members would be the number, and those would be people that would be funding the private sector share of the pie, and they would be the ones nominating the 3 county representatives. We expect to have a staff of 9, a CEO, 3 economic developers, 1 assigned to each county, and a public relations, governmental affairs specialist, and then support and clerical. The question was asked early on, can you do it with fewer economic developers? And I think you can, but I think if you do, somebody's going to get left out. If the economic development crowd is working on the projects as the projects come in, somebody's going to get left out. We really need somebody that's representing Oktibbeha County and Starkville to know the players here, know you intimately as elected officials, know who the school superintendent is, know the business leaders and community leaders, so they can put these deals together, or they can bring projects in, they can sell this community. So we're proposing to have 1 each assigned for each of the 3 communities. Again, we've already contacted a headhunter, have her in the blocks, ready to start a search fairly quickly, assuming the contracts are all signed. And we think we can get somebody on board in this interim deal doing your job. I'm going to guess January. We missed our West Point projection by 30 days, and I think in this business, within 30 days, a guesstimate of when you'd have somebody on board is pretty reasonable. Implementation timeline, and again, there's a lot of things. There's a lot of things that have to be done, and what we're here for tonight is just part of that. What our model shows here is that we would take this to the public in September, which we did. The next blue line that runs for about 2 years is what we're before you here tonight, to get the interim commitment made to provide the funds to allow us to operate as the Golden Triangle development link. The dark blue is the amount of time we think it will take for us to interview, retain the headhunter, interview somebody, and get them on the ground. And then and we're also in the public review part, where people are just talking about this project. Starting in January, we'll start making formal presentations to community groups. The purple there is time that we've allotted because we do have city elections coming up in all 3 cities. We may have to do some education and re-education of elected officials, newly elected officials. And then probably in August and September of next year, we will start getting resolutions from stakeholders. This could be port authority boards, economic development authorities. It could be it could be a multitude of groups that we consider to be stakeholders to pass resolutions and support. We put in there for each of the counties, and this was at the supervisor's request, that we would have an evaluation in November and December of 12 of whether to move forward. And I think what will determine that is how well we work and cooperate from this point to that point, and we expect it to be go well. We will introduce the legislation. It's a 3-month session, and the governor has a month to sign. So I would expect by April the legislation would be passed. And then a lot of those things down there after that are regarding chambers of commerce. Quite frankly, I don't think it affects West Point, nor does it, I think it affects Starkville based on the discussions we've had. I think it's more of an issue in Columbus. See, here you have your Main Street, your economic development, your CVB, and your Chamber of Commerce all under one roof. West Point has already done the heavy lifting of dividing theirs out when they contracted with us back in the spring. Columbus has some work to do. We have a standalone chamber, we have a standalone CVB, we have a standalone Chamber of Commerce. So there's going to have to be, and there's a lot of time allotted to that. I don't think that affects Starkville. I think that affects Columbus more than it does any of the 3 towns. And then, long story made short, that the tax is levied in September if need be, and that the GTRDA goes functional in October of 2014. That's our plan. Now, what we're here before you tonight is to take that first step. It's my understanding that the city, the OCEDA, the partnership, and the county leaders have gotten together and developed a funding formula of which each and every one of you would provide a portion of the funding to make up to $350,000 in this interim period. It's a 2-year contract. The city is, I think, Mayor, on the hook for $50,000, with the partnership, OCEDA and Oktibbeha County all being on the hook for $100,000 a year for the 3-year term, for the 2-year term. I'm sorry, 2-year term. Chris Pace is here. If you've got any questions about the contract, that are legal in nature, I would defer to Chris to answer those questions.
Questions or comments for Mr. Higgins? Alderman Carver.
Oh, I guess it's from a city standpoint. We've talked about the $50,000 funding, the 30, and you and I spoke today or yesterday about the 30,000. I mean, we feel comfortable with that, and as far as the funding source and the mechanism, do we need to talk about that? Or?
Yeah, that's that gives me a good opportunity to explain how the city funds $50,000. The path I've identified is $30,000 would come from the electric department. Now, a portion of that $30,000 would be funding that previously went for dues to the North Mississippi Industrial Development Association. Now, we've got to provide that organization 6 months' notice to get out of the organization, so we would still be in that organization through the first 6 months of 2013. And then provided that we're still getting out at that point, a portion of that revenue would be rolled into this new regional organization. Now, it's not an exact 30 for 30 swap, because right now the electric department makes a $28,000 contribution to NMIDA, and half of that is reimbursed by TVA. There is no guarantee that TVA would continue to reimburse for that. But through numerous conversations with Terry, he feels this is an appropriate place for the electric department's economic development funding to go, and he feels it's sustainable for the electric department to fund it in that capacity. The other $20,000 would come from the contingency line item of the general fund.
And then back to the I guess my question to you, the legislation of the state legislature, and I guess I was kind of intrigued by that. What's your game plan as far as getting legislation passed? Is that something y'all thought into?
Well, I think we have, and obviously when you're dealing with the legislature, you're not going to be able to think of all the stuff. We are contingent upon signing of the contracts with what I'm going to call the Starkville-Oktibbeha County team. We have an agreement with the Godwin Group that we'll sign. They're a pretty prestigious marketing company. We've got them in the blocks, ready to go to help us starting in January, doing the speaking points, how we're going to approach this. Chris Pace's firm is one of the sizable firms down in Jackson and I think has a good, I mean, they've worked on Severstal, they've worked on PACCAR, they've worked on Nissan, a lot of big projects. They've got folks that are partners in their law firm that are actually lobbyists, probably more than they are lawyers. And we will work with the governor's office, MDA, and others to help craft that legislation, because quite frankly, Mr. Carver, what we see is that if this is a good idea and it works, it's probably replicatable around the state. Okay, and while those of us may say, oh no, we just want it for ourselves, if this works here, it could work in Southwest Mississippi, it could work on the coast, it could work in other places. We met with Governor Bryant last week informally at an event. We said we'd want your staff to work with us to help craft it so that you're comfortable with it. It's going to be coming to you. Here's our plan. And he said, I want to work with you. I want to help you. So that crafting of that legislation, we're going to have to look forward and say, what do we think we want to do? What will we need to do? And how do we write it so that we can, that the legislature will approve? Now, I know I just said a mouthful there, but it's kind of like, can we do everything in the world and you approve it? Well, if not, how limiting do we make ourselves?
And then I guess my last question, this will be, I know it's complex, but within that you'll have different officials from each county, but when it comes down to the time that you're going to be actually competing and vying for an industrial-based company to come in, will Oktibbeha be competing against West Point or Clay County?
It could be. And here's, I'm going to say the patent answer that we've been given. And I spoke to Rotary in Columbus today, and if I give a different answer, it's your job to do me. A lot of times we get a request for information, request for proposals, and there's no limit. I mean, we only, historically we only submitted one community because that's all we had. Then we started adding West Point, and now we submit two. In a lot of cases, the consultant's going to Mississippi and their MDA, and they're saying, give us your proposals. If we're allowed to submit a site for each of the three communities, we would do that, period, end of sentence. If we're limited, and sometimes this happens, that TVA, for instance, may get one location that they get to submit for all of North Mississippi. Well, if it comes down to that, we have to look at the project, and then we have to make a determination which is the best site for this project, but not only which is the best site, which community is in the best position to be able to land this project, okay? And I know a lot of you are going to think, well, that's not fair. Look, we're working deals right now, and there are certain deals. If it's a big water user, it's probably going to go to West Point, okay? Well, if it's a technology-driven, higher-end, more white-collar jobs, it's probably going to go to Starkville. If it's steel or metal related, needs to be by it's probably going to go to Lowndes County, and at some point, and I think the mayor and Jack and Mr. Howard will tell you that at some point we have to communicate. We have to that board's got to know what's being looked at, what's important, what those project drivers are, and looking over our shoulder to make sure that we are putting the best site, the best community in it. I told this story at Rotary Day, and I think it merits here. Sometimes we kind of get our jollies out of somebody else's bad news, and I know it's not nice, but sometimes we do that. And I remember when Sarah Lee closed, there were some people at Columbus that said, "Boy, it's bad for West Point losing that plant, isn't it? Ha ha ha." They didn't say it that way, but it was on their face. I said, "Yeah, 257 people that worked there had a Lowndes County zip code." Okay, so while it's something bad that happened, it affects you too. And we tell this story constantly, but some of you may or may not know it or remember it, or some of you may not have heard it. Those jobs at GTRA right now, 50% of those have a Lowndes County zip code. Over 20%, 21, 22, 23, it varies a little bit, have an Oktibbeha County zip code. And about 10, 11% have a Clay County zip code, and the rest have another zip code. So we'll do our best to make sure that everybody gets shown, that everybody wins, because the only way this is going to be successful is if everybody gets a win. But your quality of win, or what's important to you, might be different than some of the other communities. I think we'll have a role if we do this. I think we'll have a role in some of the retail side, the bigger development side, things that's important to Starkville. I think we'll have the people on board on our team that can help on those, and quite frankly, already are. We're already attending meetings and in anticipation that some of this will happen and providing our expertise.
Any further questions or comments, Alderman Sistrunk?
I I have some other comments that I'll save until we actually get to the point of discussion, but this is a project that, let's be very, very honest, is being driven greatly by the fact that the link has been quite successful, and a lot of that success is attributed to you. So that's a big
Thank you.
driver in how we are moving forward in this project. And at the same time, let's be honest that there are things that were in place in Columbus and in Lowndes County that can't be replicated here in Starkville. The mega site that you put together will be difficult to put together in Oktibbeha County. The river transportation, rail transportation, not going to be here in Oktibbeha County. The fact that y'all had a huge war chest from the sale of the hospital there, whether you used it or not, made it easier to get additional funding. Since some of those things were critical to your success and are going to be difficult to replicate in Oktibbeha County and in Starkville, how do you deal with that?
Yeah.
That you're have a completely different set of circumstances.
Yeah.
That economic development here is very different.
Yeah, economic development here. Let me say this. I think when we first started working with the Starkville team, there was a perception that most of the wealth that we've generated at the GTRA area was leveraged with hospital sale money. None of the hospital sale money from Lowndes County has ever been spent on anything economic development. Soccer complexes, new administrative offices, new justice courts, absolutely, new health unit, absolutely, but none of that money has been spent on this deal.
But you had it available if you needed it.
Yeah, but
you didn't.
But
Okay.
yeah, but the winner over there was the first mega site, and the fact that Severstall grossly miscalculated its investment at $625 million in the first phase of it was over $1 billion. So there was this newfound wealth. The leadership made a decision to take no dividends and just keep plowing. So as Severstall did phase 2, these are absurd numbers, Ms. Sister, they really are. This year, Lowndes County, as a result of our efforts, put $8 million in the county coffers of a budget of $40-something million. County schools put a number in there of $10 million in their coffers as a direct result of our effort. But here's what I will tell you. The things that you point out for Starkville, that's the way most places are. That's the way most places are. Most places don't have, we're dealing with this in West Point right now. West Point's got a super site. They really do. 450 megawatts, 7 million gallons of water, 2 million gallons of sewer, rail. I mean, it is the bomb. I mean, it is a very good site. But because they're so small, the city and the county's total assessed valuation debt cannot exceed $20 million. So what we're having to do there is we're having to say, we're going to the candy store, and we can't spend more than $20 million on one project or the projects in the aggregate. So we're having to be selective, and we're having to develop a strategy. We'll have to do the same thing here. No, you don't have a riverport, but you got a university. Okay. It's a big asset, but I think in a way, manufacturing's been vilified somewhat in Starkville, and I think the high-end advanced manufacturing playing on the school, the 50,000, the 40,000 composites, a company we talked about, I think some of us, a helmet manufacturer that we were working that was looking at GTRA Park, probably would have been a whole lot better on the North Farm property than it ever would have been at GTRA. So I think what you have to do, and it's kind of like being a coach, you have to go in, you have to assess your talent, you have to find out what you do well and what you don't do well. And the key is try to avoid what you don't do well, and let's figure out what we do well, and then let's possibly exploit it to the nth degree every day.
And we've been dazzled by those numbers that you throw around.
Well, they're real.
They are in Lowndes County. They are.
But let me tell y'all something, and I know I'm going on, but let me tell you something, because this is from the heart. I came to Columbus, Mississippi. I was going to punch my card for 3 years. I was going to get a single, I was going to get a double, and it's like football coaching, okay? You do good, you go move up. You do good, you move up. That's what I was going to do. I never in my wildest dreams flowcharted in my mind or assumed that what has happened could happen. But what happened is when that mega site program came, we took advantage of it. And every time we can, we try to build on an asset. it works there, it'll work here, it'll work in West Point, it's just gonna work at different levels,
It's different scale.
different scale.
And we need to keep that in mind when we hear how much has gone into the county and how much has gone into the school system.
Yeah.
That we're not talking about that same scale here in.
No,
in
most of the
Starkville,
projects that will
County.
look here, if it were the North Farm area or somewhere around the university, it would be that advanced high-tech manufacturing. I'm talking about 50,000 square foot buildings, maybe there was 120 employees, maybe something like that, at good pay. Most of those will ask for an exemption, a city tax, of county tax, and they'll pay full boat school tax for 10 years. The good news, though, is in the 11th year, they do go on the rolls.
You alluded to the value of this contract and that it appears that a very small part of it in those first 2 years is going to come from the city. The truth of the matter is that the city will account for almost 70% of the county's mill. So when you talk about county dollars, you're talking about Starkville people paying those tax
Absolutely.
dollars. When you're talking about OCEDA making a contribution, that 2% money, that's right, that 2% money is being paid by Starkville residents and guests. So all of that really does roll back to the city of Starkville. And yet when it comes time to appoint the governing body for this entity, the city of Starkville has no input.
Yep. When we
It's the
started,
Board of Supervisors.
yeah, when we started looking at this, we said, well, the millage will be levied at the county level, the millage to support the deal. And it was determined that that those supervisors would make that appointment. Now, nothing, and I think we talked about this on the steering committee and with Chris too, I would expect that as appointments are being made, that the city of Starkville, West Point, and Columbus will sit down with their board of supervisors and come up with a good name, okay? The requirement is that they be a resident of that county, okay? But I think it would be good politics for all three if the bodies would sit down and do it. Somebody asked the question, well, why don't you just add a city spot there? And all of a sudden, the boards get bigger and bigger and bigger.
Cumbersome.
But I would expect and encourage that there be cooperation between the city and the county on who those spots are. And I think after sitting through our steering committee meetings, Parker, I think y'all's team could do that. I don't see any problem. It might not be the person that y'all may want as an individually, but I think as a group, I think the county, what I've seen, they would work with the city, and I would hope, I know they would in West Point, and I would hope they would in Columbus.
But there's no guarantee that
No,
the
ma'am.
city would have any input into
Not
that
under,
governing body.
not under this plan, but again, we're still fact finding, we're still saying, tell us where what we're trying to do tonight, but it rolls into this. What we're trying to do tonight is get the ball rolling, get something in place so that you guys aren't just dead in the water right now with not having somebody.
And you've talked about a $350,000 a year contract during this time frame, and then the legislation will, y'all will seek this legislation, which will be a local and private bill that allows up to 2 mills. It almost certainly will be levied here in Oktibbeha County. We've recently gone through some discussions about spending large sums of money at the city level for a municipal facility, and have been fairly vilified because people weren't allowed to vote on it. Will they be allowed to vote on this tax increase?
Our proposal to the legislature would be no, but now the legislature would determine that. I would expect we'll issue that the bill will be introduced local and private. It's what we would expect. I fully expect that it'll be double referred to finance. I fully expect that we'll have a long educational battle before the session and during the session.
And if it's passed, what likely comes out of it is another governmental entity, and we're not eliminating anything. We're adding a layer of government. We will likely have a 2 mil increase here in the county of Oktibbeha, and the same things that we've been vilified for in trying to build a municipal complex will apply to this group. There will be no true public input, no vote.
Alderman Carver, did you have something?
I did. I mean, just at first, I kind of I guess the twofold question. One, is this time sensitive, something we have to vote on tonight?
It is time sensitive. It is time sensitive because everything is sitting on hold for hiring a developer for Starkville, Tippah County. And the goal is to get that economic developer in place by January of this year. Now that's very, very tight if we have a contract executed by the end of this month. Well, the next time we meet is November 6th. So if you kick that 3 weeks further down, you're making it all but impossible that you get somebody hired by January. Now here's where kind of a domino effect kicks in. Now you say, why is it so important that you have somebody in January? And it's because we don't have a whole lot of time to see if this works before next fall. Everybody's making a decision as to whether we want to pursue legislation on this. And I believe that you're going to have to give this person that's hired some time to work in Starkville, Tippah County to get a proper assessment of whether this is working or not. If this lingers into the spring or early summer, then you effectively haven't given that person any time at all to gauge how this is working.
I feel comfortable with basically a $20,000 contingency funding tonight, but if we were to vote tonight, does that automatically, I guess you're saying 2 mills from the city would be about $320,000 in September of 2014. So if we vote tonight, does that, and if you're saying the legislation passes as you wish, then that's pretty much the vote tonight locked us in for a 2 mil tax increase in September 2014.
No, I think the only thing we're asking you to do tonight is to consider the contract that deals with this on the interim basis, the $350,000 a year for 2 years. I think that's the only thing we're asking you to do tonight. Now, we think some of this other stuff's going to start shaking down there in that period of time, and I expect that we'd be back before you maybe multiple times during that time, answering more questions, Ms. Sistrunk, probably public hearings, the whole 9 yards. But all we're asking you to do tonight is to authorize the $350,000 contract for 2 years. And your portion of that, Mayor, is $50,000 a year for two years.
And you've got built into that timeline, is it September or October of 2013, when everybody gets to make a final decision?
It's
whether they're seeking legislation?
November, December is what we've got. We got 2 months blocked, November, December.
So November, December, all entities, all 3 counties will have the opportunity to make the decision whether we really want to go through with this and whether we really want to ask for the legislation. Tonight, we're specifically discussing the 2-year contract. Alderman Sistrunk.
And it's true. Tonight, we are only discussing the 2-year contract, but this 2-year contract very much sets us on a path to the legislation that you've laid out for us tonight. So, yes, it is a vote on an interim contract, but it very much sets us on that path. And in 2013, when this comes up, there will be a new board, as you've acknowledged. And to be honest, a new board will not have their feet under them very well and won't comprehend all of this, won't necessarily be able to see all of the implications of the decisions that they're making, and will rely very much on what this board has done, which is set us on a path toward the legislation that we're talking about, to the additional layer of government, to the 2 mil increase.
Mr. Mayor,
Alderman Perkins.
I move that we take a 5-minute recess, please.
All right, any objection to recess for 5 minutes? Any objection to 5-minute recess? Any objection? Any objection? Saying none, standing recess for 5 minutes. Meeting will now come back to order. And discussion continues on the proposed contract for regional economic development.
Mayor, I move that we table this. There's obviously some things that have come up that people have questions about.
Motion has been made by Alderman Sistrunk to table the matter. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Motion has been seconded by Alderman Corey. All those in favor, please signify by raising your hand. All those opposed, please signify by raising your hand.
Oh,
I was going to say, you can't vote.
sorry.
By a vote of 5 in favor with 2 against, this measure passes. A matter is tabled. Thank you, gentlemen, for being here tonight.
Corey. Okay. Yeah, hang on, we made it here.
The next matter on the agenda is the consideration of the override of the mayor's veto on the matter of opening the emergency entrance to Douglas MacArthur Drive in the Green Oak subdivision. Discussion. Alderman Perkins.
Mr. Mayor and members of the board, on the 18th of September of 2012, the board by a vote of 3-2-2 voted to remove the emergency access gate at the gated area of Douglas MacArthur and Stark Road, and the board in that motion voted to have a sign erected and displayed saying for emergency and city vehicles only, and to improve the emergency access for the necessary public safety vehicles. Thereafter, the mayor of our city vetoed the action, and the matter is on the agenda tonight for an override of the mayor's veto. And in light of my discussion, I move that we override the mayor's veto regarding said action of the board dated September 18, 2012.
Alderman Perkins has made a motion to override the mayor's veto on the board approval of the removal of the emergency access gate at Douglas MacArthur Drive and the replacement with emergency access. Signing said motion passed on September 18th, 2012. Alderman Perkins, is that your motion?
That's a fair statement, but it's in the record.
All right, do I hear a second?
Second.
Motion has been seconded by Alderman Sistrunk. Alderman Perkins, do you wish to speak on the merits?
No, sir.
Discussion.
I got one, Mr. Mayor. I know the last vote, when this first came up, I abstained it. And somewhere down the line, it offended a lot of people because I abstained it. And it offended some of my colleagues. And I know numerous occasions some of my colleagues have abstained it and no one said nothing. I don't abstain, they got walked out on motions and didn't vote at all. So, and the public just kind of disappointed me with they saying that they pay me to vote yes. Well, my vote is, if I abstain, it's still a vote. If I vote yay, it's still a vote. If I vote nay, you still gonna say something. So it disappointed me the way some of them came and some of the things that they said. But and I abstained it because I really hadn't looked at it and I had never thought about it. The reason I abstained, and I felt like that's what the best decision for me to make at that time. And for you to say that we elected officials to our own ward, I think that's very, very being selfish for you to say that I'm elected by the city, not just for Ward 7. I'm elected to handle all the city business. That's what I'm elected for, not just Ward 7. And some of the citizens got up and said those things. And I think that was very rude and very selfish for them. And then, personally, I still think it's very selfish if we want to keep this gate up and then we don't want nobody to come in our neighborhood. What does everybody feel that same way with that selfish attitude? And I mean, we're supposed to be trying to love and try to get along with one another, but that kind of being selfish and saying, I can't walk my dog. That's why they got Monk Creek over there, but we can go walk the dog if that's where you want to go, because they built Monk Creek over there for that. And children playing in the street, I hope that's not so, because I ain't gonna let mine, but I'm not gonna let mine play in the street. But the mockery that I received from the public, I just felt like, and from my colleagues, I just felt like it was unjust. And for that reason, I just had to say that, because I abstained it. And the last time I remember, I'm a full-grown man, and I have the rights to say what I wanted and the right to vote the way I wanted, because I was elected by the peoples for the city of Starkville, not Ward 7. With that, Mr. Mayor.
Further discussion? Any further discussion? Any further discussion? Any further discussion? Any further discussion? Seeing none, we will move into a roll call vote on the motion to override. And remember, a vote of yay is a vote in favor of the override. It will require either 5 votes of yay or a combination of a majority plus abstentions that equals 5 votes. Abstentions are always counted with the majority. Now, please answer yay, nay, or abstain as the clerk calls your name.
At the request of the left side of the table, we'll go 7-1 today. Alderman Vaughn.
Yay.
Alderman Perkins.
Yay.
Alderman Dumas.
Nay.
Alderman Corey.
Nay.
Alderman Parker.
Nay.
Alderman Sistrunk.
Yay.
Alderman Carver.
Nay.
By a vote of 3 votes in favor and 4 votes against, the motion to override fails. Alderman Perkins.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to have some further discussion on this. Ms. Spruill, will you come forward, please? You can have a seat there. Ms. Spruill, you have extensive background in municipal affairs. You worked in municipal government, and you've been our interim city clerk for a period of time. I would like to know whether or not you have done extensive research of the board minutes for all the relevant time periods from October 19, 1999, as to whether there is any authorization in the board minutes that authorized the installation of a gate at Douglas MacArthur.
Alderman Perkins, I went back to the original October 19th, 1999, and brought it forward until the date that the gate was paid for in August of 2007, and I was unable to find any verification of through the minutes that there was a board order to install the gate.
Ms. Spruill, my second question is, have you done any extensive research of the claims docket for the relevant time period from October 1999, when the board first authorized this measure, to find whether or not there has been any board action that authorized the construction, installation, and maintenance of a gate at the Douglas MacArthur?
I could find nothing in the claims docket that reflected that the gate had been paid for. And those claims dockets during the time frame when that gate was installed through and after the time when it was paid for.
Ms. Spruill, you've been the Chief Administrative Officer for, since 2005, and you, I think, served as mayor in some municipality, and you have other extensive experience. You are a licensed attorney, Dr. Spruill, and also, Ms. Spruill, you serve interim city clerk. Tell me, based upon your expertise and experience, what is the mechanism in which the board speaks?
The board speaks through its minutes, Alderman.
Yes, ma'am. Mr. Mayor, I need to speak to 2 other individuals. Just keep your seat, Ms. Spruill. Mr. Taylor Adams, have you had the occasion and opportunity to do an extensive search of the claims docket for the relevant time period as to whether or not the Board of Alderman has authorized for the construction, installation, and maintenance of a gate at Douglas MacArthur?
Yes.
What did your extensive search find, if anything?
My findings were consistent with Ms. Spruill's findings.
Thank you. Mr. Attorney, Mr. Latimer, good evening. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you.
Mr. Latimer, you've heard the statements from Ms. Spruill and from our city clerk / finance director. In light of the fact that there are no minutes that authorize the installation, construction, and maintenance of a gate for Douglas MacArthur in the minutes, and in light of the fact that there has been no approval for the construction, installation of a gate at Douglas MacArthur in the claims docket, is that gate legal and proper?
A bedrock principle of municipal law is that the board does in fact speak through its minutes, and no authorizations can be made except through the minutes, and that when a board when expenditures get made by the city, that those have to be on the claims docket, or they have to be authorized by separate and distinct board order. If there are truly no minutes authorizing the gate to be installed, and if there is no mention whatsoever on the claims docket of authorization for payment for the gate, then there would be no legal authority for the implementation of the gate.
Ms. Pruitt, you heard the city's attorney's opinion. You checked the minutes and you're thoroughly and 100% satisfied that there is no authorization in the minutes or in the claims docket for the relevant time period. And I think the relevant time period would be from October 1999 forward.
Yes, sir. In my search, I found nothing. The gate was installed in August, or the gate was paid for in August of 2007. It was installed June the 15th of 2007.
And one final thing, I have one comment, Mayor, you have the floor. And so, and you heard the city attorney, and you said earlier that the board speaks through its minutes.
Yes, sir.
And if it's not in the minutes, then it has, just like it does that, what's all that means?
That means it was not an authorized action by the board. Right.
Ms. Pruitt, you're in charge of the, you're the liaison to the department heads and the city staff. And in light of the city attorney said if there's no minutes, you testified that there are no minutes to authorize it, nothing in the claims docket, city clerk, nothing in the claims docket, and the law is well settled in this state, like the city attorney just said, as general municipal law. If the board has not spoken, it has not happened, so it's not in the minutes. So the bottom line is the attorney said it's not legal and proper. He's the hired attorney for the board. He gave us advice and said if it's not in the minutes, not in the claim docket, the board is not, the gate is not legally there. So the bottom line is the gate has to come down. So you're charged with the, you don't take no board order, don't take no action. You're in charge of the staff. I mean, the law is clear in the state. The attorney said it's not legal and it's not proper if it's in the minutes. So the bottom line is the gate has to come down. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Question?
Yes.
City Attorney, can we make a board order tonight authorizing the gate to stay up?
You have that option.
How do we handle the payment issue since it was not, it was never authorized by the city?
I'll have to look into that, frankly, given how the facts are developing.
So is it possible that that will fall to whoever authorized the payment outside of the normal claims docket?
And again, I don't know the facts on that, so I've got to know what happened.
Yeah, and just a question of fact, there's no allegation that the gate was stolen here,
No.
is there? So we do acknowledge that the gate was paid for by the city. I wasn't here in 2007. I can't speak to what the city was or wasn't doing. And just a few observations as the board considers whether to go forward and authorize a gate that has existed in plain sight for 5 years now. Again, the board has left several actions on the record with respect to this matter. First, going back to 1999, the board took action to completely close Maple Drive, Redbud Drive, and Douglas MacArthur Drive. And it certainly is debatable whether the board had the authority to do as it did in 2001, which was to come back without reacquiring the property and reopen for emergency access only the entrance to Douglas MacArthur Drive. But the board did take that act setting the policy of that being an emergency access entrance. And I would then say certainly it falls to the purview of the city administration to enforce ordinances that are adopted by the board. Again, I can't tell you why the record says what it does or doesn't say, but I don't think it is in dispute that in 2007 the city purchased the gate that enforces emergency access on Douglas MacArthur Drive. Now, what is baffling to me and seems to defy logic is if that was an action that the board at that time was opposed to, is how that gate sat there against the will of the board in plain sight for 5 full years. Now, again, we can debate whether in 2001 the board had the lawful authority to even partially open Douglas MacArthur Drive for emergency access only, without reacquiring the property. Because as far as I know, Ms. Spruill, there was no action taken by the board to go through a condemnation eminent domain proceeding to reopen that street for emergency access. So it is certainly debatable whether the board had lawful authority to partially reopen for emergency access at that point. But that being the case, once the board has set that policy, I would say if there was someone in city government that had a line item in their budget that paid for that gate, it was certainly within the purview as an administrative matter to enforce the emergency access of Douglas MacArthur Drive. And furthermore, I would say the board has just had an opportunity to determine whether they want that gate to remain in place or not, and having the discussion as to whether the gate should be removed. Now, the process as our government sets it up is a majority of the board must pass something to create an order, and then the mayor has an opportunity to veto it. That happened in this case. A majority of the board passed the action. It is not complete until the mayor doesn't veto it. I vetoed that action, and a majority of the board has voted not to override that action. Therefore, when given an opportunity to decide whether the gate should be removed, the Board of Aldermen has just spoken through the minutes in deciding not to remove the gate.
May I be recognized?
Mr. Attorney?
I think there are two options now, given the state of the law, and that is that the executive branch can make a decision based on the facts and the law that are in play, or the board can give a direct policy directive through a vote.
And when you say the executive branch, I assume since the chief administrative officer doesn't act absent authority from the board to act, you mean the executive branch pursuant to the mayor's superintending powers would determine whether that gate remains in place or not?
A decision, that's an ultimate conclusion. The law and the facts have been stated. And yes, it's up to you as the superintending person of the city to execute city policy within the facts and the law of each situation.
Mr. Mayor, may I be
And you can rest assured, I will not be ordering that the gate be taken down.
May I be recognized?
Alderman Perkins.
Mr. Attorney, now, I want you to be frank with us, okay? I mean, your advice has now become inconsistent. You need to be clean with us. You need to be honest with us. Now, the board is the governing body. Now, as you already have said, you've given an opinion on the record tonight that if the minutes did not authorize the installation of the gate, if the claims docket did not authorize, you have told us on the record with the media present, open meeting in compliance with open meetings law, that the gate is not legal and proper. Now, where in the law, what case can you cite that states that the mayor speaks for the board? Now, hold on 1 second. Let me give the floor. Now, there's no authority for the mayor to speak for us. Now, the board has not spoken, and of course, and I'm glad that the staff has of course, earlier when we discussed that, there had not been extensive research, but thanks for all the due diligence. But in light of the fact that there is nothing, that's why we sit in these board meetings and take action, because once we take action, then that official action becomes the voice for the city of Starkville. Now, there's nothing on the minutes. So in other words, if there's nothing in the minutes that authorize the construction, the installation, and maintenance of a gate at Douglas MacArthur by this board or by any prior board, then the law in the state of Mississippi is well settled that a board only speaks through its minutes. That's why we strive so hard to ensure that the minutes are always correct. The minutes is the sole voice. There's nothing in law in the state of Mississippi that says that the mayor is the voice for the board. If that's the case, then we would not need the board. Now, and no disrespect, Mr. Turner, I have great respect for you, but on this important issue, we hire you in all due respect to make sure that your advice is clean. But this law is just so well settled that you cannot leave this as a policy consideration for the executive branch. The executive branch implements the law as the executive branch based upon the law that's enacted by the legislative body, the legislative branch. So if there's no law that's been enacted by the passage at this meeting or by a prior meeting of the legislative branch, then there's nothing for the executive branch to carry out. Yes, that statute in Title 21 of the code says that the mayor is the superintending officer of the municipal affairs. But that is correct. But he is the municipal officer of the municipal affairs that has been adopted and approved by the legislative branch of government. We are the legislative branch of government. There is no way that the mayor can decide for this board as to whether or not a gate is going to be up, whether it's Hospital Road or Douglas MacArthur or Maple or Redbud or any other street in the city, if there has not been any board action. That is purely contrary to state law. And there's no way, and that's purely inconsistent with your advice. There's no way the mayor can just sit here and tell us, and you can't either legally, in my opinion. I challenge that, because the Board of Alderman has the authority, and once the board action passes, and what passed tonight was the override of the mayor's veto. But the issue here is the staff has told us that there's nothing in the minutes. That's the question before the court, if it was there, would be whether or not there's any legal authorization for the construction, installation, and maintenance of a gate at Douglas MacArthur. And then in responding to that, and the issue to be briefed is, what is the authority for the mayor, for the board to speak in its minutes? So if it's not in the minutes, then it does not happen. So therefore, the mayor has no authority, and the gate has to come down.
Let me just touch on a point here. What is critical, nobody's debating whether the board has the authority to act, but the board has not taken action to remove the gate. Therefore, if there is any legal remedy that's needed, if there is an act that needs to be taken to take the gate down, I am telling you, I don't interpret the situation that way. I do not think that gate is illegally in place, and I am not going to make an order to have the gate taken down. Absent the board making an order to take the gate down, and absent me in my day-to-day superintending capacity making an order to take the gate down, there is no lawful way for the gate to be taken down. Do you disagree?
Alderman Perkins, I want to address your issues first, because I want to make sure we're communicating. My opinion tonight, based on the facts and that I've heard tonight, and the law that I know is so well settled in Mississippi, is that if there is no authorization for the gate in the minutes, and if there has been no authorization for payment of the gate in the claims docket, there is no authority for the gate. I did not say that the mayor's decision was right. It's not the decision that I think is right under the law. You've heard my opinion.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That
Alderman
clarifies
Parker.
Mayor, in light that the gate has been up for so many years, and no matter how we got to where we are today, still don't understand the intensity of this particular situation and why it has all of a sudden come up. But I would move that this board allow that gate to remain in place. Is that a proper, city attorney? What type of motion would I need to? Is that?
I think that's what you want to accomplish, apparently.
Right. Well, I move that we allow the gate to remain in place.
Motion.
And operate as it is currently.
Motion has been made by Alderman Parker for the board to permit the gate at Douglas MacArthur Drive and Stark Road to ensure emergency access remain in place. Alderman Parker, is that your motion?
It is.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Motion has been seconded by Alderman Carver. Alderman Parker, do you wish to speak on the merits? Discussion.
I've got a question. How in the world did this happen? I mean, how did this gate, how did it become a product of the city if the city never actioned payment?
Ask Ms. Sproul your question.
Ms. Sproul, do you have insight on that?
In doing the research for this, it was, I discovered some information relative to how it got paid. There was a memo from Ms. Tyndall at the time, who's administrative assistant to the mayor, who was seeking guidance on how that payment would be made, to what account that would be charged. And in that memo, it was stated that this was a part of a street improvement project that was authorized by then Alderman Davis, who was the alderman for that ward, as a part of the street improvement projects that were divided up among the 7 wards. And so this was brought forward under his street improvement capital project funding, and it was authorized in that manner.
So is that not a justifiable line item of a claims docket?
It was never in the claims docket.
None of those street improvements
No.
were?
We have the check that shows that it was paid for, but I have been able to find there are collective amounts of street improvement funds, but this was not a part of that. That was done by Falcon Construction at the time. I have they're like several $400,000, $300,000 street improvement funds that are Falcon Construction, but this particular item was not included in that group. And there is no independent and single claim docket item that I have been able to locate in the claims dockets that came during that time frame.
And Chris, are you still good with and I know the mayor mentioned the resolution that gave us the authority for access on this property, or does that resolution still stand? Is that an accurate resolution given all of this?
You know, I said previously in meetings that the city has full jurisdiction over its streets and broad power to promote the health, welfare, and safety of the citizens. And that reservation for emergency access, I think that resolution would stand up under law.
Even across private property?
Yes.
I got one question.
Alderman Vaughn.
Is it legal to earmark money that way?
Are you
Chris,
asking me?
I'm asking you the question.
Is
You
it
sit
illegal
attorney, I'm
to
asking you,
earmark?
Is it legal for money to be earmarked that way?
Mrs. Sproul, tell me again how the money was earmarked. Right? I want to make sure I heard you.
I'm deriving this from the memo, solely from the memo, that each ward had a certain amount of money that they were using that year for various projects within each ward. And in this memo, it noted that the gate would be paid out of the Ward 1's pot of money, if you will, that was intended for street improvements.
May I tag on to Alderman Bond's question? I think in addition to, is the allocation acceptable, the other question is it permissible for an individual alderman to direct expenses of funds?
Correct.
Let me answer it this way. I don't have any experience in that arrangement of aldermen being given a budget for their ward to allocate money as they see fit. I would have to research that. I do know the general principles of law, which is if you're going to expend the money, then it needs to be either by separate board order or spelled out specifically or on the claims docket.
Alderman Parker.
And I understand all these questions and concerns, and I don't have any problem getting to the root of how it got there. We can research and find that information out, but the motion on the table now is to allow it to remain, and if we need to research this to find out, I don't see how it's ties to my motion of allowing it to stay, I guess.
Yeah, and I would just offer.
We can discuss it, that's fine.
At a minimum, it would be nice for the board to clean this up, because I would submit what we don't have is, we don't have proof that action was not authorized 5 years ago. We have failure to find proof positive, going back through 5-year-old records, that the clear intent was evidence in something that the board did. Now, again, how the gate sat there for 5 full years, and if this was an act that the board did not approve of, nobody on the board raised that issue until a month ago, is beyond me. But that being said, if the board didn't approve this motion, effectively where we are is there would have been no motion approved to remove the gate, and then you would have failure to approve a motion to keep the gate in place, which obviously is not a good place for the city to be. But again, my only conclusion there is if that is the case, then it is left to me and my authority in superintending the day-to-day affairs of the city to decide what actually takes place with that gate there, because there is no mandate otherwise on the table. Alderman Ball.
So in other words, you telling me I sit here for 3 years and voted yay for this claim docket and not knowing what's on it. In other words, it's not safe for set up here and approve this claim docket. If some comes up on like this, it's not safe for us. I would never do that again. Claim docket, no docket.
Alderman Court.
Well, two things. Number one, this is probably why Alderman McLaurin voted against every claims docket in the last term.
He was a smart man.
But number two, I was on the board at that time, and I'm trying to think back to how all this played out. And I do remember when we took a large pot that we kind of divided evenly amongst each of the wards for improvements. I thought a part of that was that we provided our recommendations to city staff, and then that was compiled together into a capital improvements list that we adopted. Now, I may be wrong, I'm just because I think Spring Street sidewalk was one of my projects, and that was on a list. I remember seeing it at the time. So.
And I have been unable to locate that as a part of that list.
And again, we're going back through records that are 5 years old. I would just submit to you that what I've heard tonight neither proves or disproves anything, other than the fact that we have a gate that we know the city paid for 5 years ago that has been there the entire time. Alderman Carver.
Mr. Sproul, I know your time is limited, and I know you're extremely busy, but if all this extensive research you did, and also to the city clerk and to the city attorney, well, who guided all this research that you spent all this time on?
I was asked to research it based on this item being on the agenda.
By whom?
By Alderman Perkins.
Yeah. I'd like to go, as the mayor's saying, at least go forward with some kind of clarification tonight, because what we do is when this board steps back for 2 more weeks and more research is done and more things are brought up, and you see these are often when you get to these settings, recesses are taken, scripted questions are asked, and scripted answers are given, and so it's at least I applaud the mayor for vetoing this. This is one of the few things we go through that's got a history to it. It's almost become a personal ambition of certain people on this board, even though there's been a majority of the board on several occasions. There's been a veto, obvious majority of the constituents in that area. To continue with this, it's almost a personal vendetta or something like that, but I'd like to see that this board, at least before we do anything else and before we take any more recesses and before we do any more extensive research, is to have some kind of vote and put it in writing and put it in our minutes so it's official, that the board, at least to see how we feel tonight. I think we all know how the vote's going to be. I applaud Alderman Perkins for doing that, to look into this subject, but it's something that there's been a history to it. He knows better than anybody at this board what the history is. But again, just know that when sometimes and oftentimes we come in here, it's often scripted answers to scripted questions. So I'd like to see at least to go on and have a vote right now if we can on Alderman Perkins' motion.
Alderman Parker's motion. Further discussion? Any further discussion? Any further discussion? Any further discussion? Any further discussion? Seeing none, we'll now move into a roll call vote on Alderman Parker's motion, which is to permit the emergency access gate at the intersection of Douglas MacArthur Drive and Stark Road.
This time we'll go left to right. Alderman Carver.
Yeah.
Sir?
This is to keep the gate up? Yes.
Alderman Sistrunk?
Nay.
Alderman Parker?
Yay.
Alderman Corey?
Yay.
Alderman Dumas?
Yay.
Alderman Perkins?
Nay.
Alderman Vaughn?
Nay.
By a vote of 4 in favor and 3 against, Alderman Parker's motion passes, and the board has now officially permitted the gate at Douglas MacArthur Drive and Stark Road. And Ms. Spruill, you can actually remain seated because the next matter on the agenda is a report from the Audit and Budget Committee. Ms. Spruill.
That was why I did. The audit.
And I'll ask for decorum as you're exiting the room. We still have a meeting to conduct.
The Audit and Budget Committee met on Wednesday in the conference room last week, and we took up the matter of the final budget amendment for fiscal year 2012. And in your packet should be the items that were considered as a part of that. You have a $396,616 amendment that was reflected in additional revenues from grants, from traffic court and violations, and from miscellaneous items such as a TV franchise that were above and beyond the anticipated revenue. And then under the expenses section, as you might imagine, there were additional expenses associated with gas and oil, overtime, labor, and that sort of expense that we had to account for as a part of that final budget amendment. So we have put this in front of the board. The Audit and Budget Committee is recommending approval of this final amendment for fiscal year 2012.
Any questions or comments for Ms. Spruill?
Move approval.
Motion has been made by Alderman Dumas to approve of the final budget amendment for fiscal year 2012 as recommended by the Audit and Budget Committee as presented. Alderman Dumas, is that your motion?
It is.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Motion has been seconded by Alderman Parker. Alderman Dumas, do you wish to speak on the merits?
No.
Any discussion? Any discussion? Any discussion? Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please signify by saying nay.
Nay.
By a vote of 5 in favor and 1 against, this measure passes. The next matter on the agenda is consideration of the interim department head for building codes and planning. And recommendation for interim department head is Ms. Lynn Spruill.
Move approval.
Motion has been made by Alderman Dumas to approve of naming Lynn Spruill the interim department head for the building codes and planning department with all duties and responsibility normally falling on that position, falling to Ms. Spruill. Alderman Dumas, is that your motion?
It is.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Motion has been seconded by Alderman Vaughn. Alderman Dumas, you wish to speak on the matter?
No.
Alderman Sistrunk.
I know how much Ben has done for the city and how much that's going to leave for Ms. Spruill to do in your absence. And to that extent, I want the board to move as quickly as we can to advertise this position. There's not a job description or position to be advertised on tonight's agenda, but I'd like Ms. Spruill to add that to the next agenda, please.
Further discussion? Any further discussion? Any further discussion? Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please signify by saying nay. Measure clearly passes. The next matter on the agenda is the consideration of approval of P&Z item number FP 12-03.
Mr. Mayor, I've got a comment that will go for the first 3 of these, or the first 4 of these, and perhaps this is part of our new final plat process. But there's several conditions on the back of these, more so than I think I've seen in previous times with the stormwater conditions, sidewalk. What do we have in a way of leverage to ensure that those conditions are actually met, considering this is the final plat?
Well, in Alderman Dumas, in the case of the first 2 items, we have a maintenance bond and memorandum of the developer's agreement. That project in particular was a very large project. It was all built at the same time, which was a little unusual in how it was built. Infrastructure and residences were all constructed at the same time. So it being a large project and have all of that going on at the same time, it was a little bit different than our normal residential subdivision.
Right.
So that's making sure that everything that was covered for all the different departments for streets and drainage, and also for water and sanitary sewer, make sure everything was covered.
Right,
As
but,
it-
but
as it's
in, we'll use, I think these are pretty standard on all the final plats we'll see. It says erosion control vegetation shall be established on all disturbed areas. Sidewalk construction shall be complete and conform to the city sidewalk ordinance. Stormwater facilities shall be completely installed and properly functioning prior to staff execution of the final plat. So have all those been completed?
I believe everything has been completed. I checked with the department heads this morning just to make sure. Mr. Kemp is satisfied with everything that's been provided as far as a maintenance bond and performed inspections. Same for the water and sewer department. The building official has also conducted inspections for sidewalks and areas that he looks at as far as from the infrastructure side as part of their routine building inspections, which in this case, the residences have already been built, driveways, curb cuts, et cetera.
Have any COs been issued?
We have issued one CO for the office, and we have issued 2 COs for residences so that the manager and the assistant manager can move into their homes and get the children registered for school this year. The remaining houses have received final inspections, but we have not issued certificates of occupancy, because that's a condition of the final plat being recorded.
But and so other than on the maintenance bond, is there an expiration date on that bond?
I believe it's 2 years.
2 years?
2 years.
And so Edward, from your side, as far as streets are concerned, sidewalks are concerned, stormwater is concerned, they're good to go?
And part of it is being initially wrote the staff report for P and Z, what, probably
3 weeks ago
Gotcha.
now.
Okay.
And Mr. Hughes has worked pretty much around the clock to satisfy any outstanding infrastructure
Good.
issues. But if any do crop up on the streets in the next 2 years for the drainage or infrastructure, we do have the bond in place to take care of those.
Has he top dressed his road?
He used concrete roads.
Concrete, okay.
So they're completely built out.
I just don't want to approve the final plat knowing this is a leverage piece that we have to ensure that this thing's properly built, constructed, so, okay, good. Well, with that, no,
I have a question. The maintenance bond is to ensure that if the conditions aren't completed by the developer, that we have the funds available to complete those items. How much is that maintenance bond?
Ms. Sistrick, I'm not sure. That's
I think it's
pretty much been
$50,000,
Edward.
and it's primarily for workmanship and materials. Like Ben said, this is a very unique project. I don't know if the city's ever undertaken a project like this where you build all the houses and all the infrastructure at the same time. So typically, like for instance, a developer will have ownership of the roadways for, until they build it out at 85%, which could take 8 or 10 years. And in this case, Mr. Hughes is gonna go ahead and get COs on all 75 houses, and he's gonna then turn over all the streets at that time because they are fully constructed. So we have a 2-year maintenance bond for any defects that may arise as the traffic, runs over those roadways, or anything that pops up.
And that's a sufficient amount, do you think? It doesn't seem like that goes very far
I
when we
believe
talk
it
about
is. We've
streets
done
and
pretty
sidewalks and
extensive,
such.
Inspections on all the infrastructure. We see all sanitary sewer lines, all storm lines. We have looked at every sidewalk, curb gutter, and it all looks really good. And I think this is just gonna take care of anything, and I believe it's gonna be small things that may pop up here and there.
are streetlights included?
They are not a requirement for the final plat, but I believe the electric department is planning on installing them.
They've been ordered but not installed.
So the developer was not doing that?
Because of the public streets.
And then as far as the COs are concerned, are we anticipating him coming in and getting a complete batch of COs at one time so that he can move in ready in bunches?
Well, the building official and the inspector they've conducted all their final inspections. I believe there were two residences where there were some electrical issues with the service connection, which were being resolved, and they may have been resolved this afternoon. Final inspections have been completed. Mr. Bill has prepared certificates of occupancy that need to be printed up, signed, and dated. I mean, it's sitting on go.
So will these go on the tax rolls this year or next year?
I believe it'll be this year.
This year? I move approval with the conditions as stated in the staff report.
Motion has been made by Alderman Dumas to approve the Reed Place Phase 1 final subdivision plat as proposed with 15 conditions as unanimously recommended by the Planning and Zoning Commission. Alderman Dumas, is that your motion?
It is.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Motion's been seconded by Alderman Parker. Alderman Dumas, you wish to speak on the merits?
I do not.
Discussion. Any discussion? Any discussion? Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please signify by saying nay.
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 By a vote of 3 in favor, 4 in favor, and 2 against, this measure passes.
I move approval with recommendations as presented in staff packet.
Motion has been made by Alderman Dumas to approve of the Reed Place Phase 2 final subdivision plat as proposed with 15 conditions as unanimously recommended by the Planning and Zoning Commission. Alderman Dumas, is that your motion?
Yes.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Motion has been seconded by Alderman Parker. Alderman Dumas, you wish to speak on the merits?
I do not.
Any discussion? Any discussion? Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please signify by saying nay.
Nay.
By a vote of 4 in favor with 2 against, this measure passes. The next matter on the agenda is the consideration of the approval of P&Z item number FP 12-05.
I just want to make one statement on this, and I don't think any of the parties are here, but for staff perspectives, I do agree that the access condition that was written, forgive me, I'm trying to find it, number 6 is probably not best assigned to a final plat, but I do want to make sure that stays a discussion point as these discussions go forward from a DRC perspective, because on this corner, you have Annabella Street, you have Vine Street, you have Yellow Jacket Road, then you will additionally have a new access way into the front piece of property off of South Montgomery. And we very quickly will become a very jumbled street network perspective. And so I know item 6 is stricken from the final plat perspective. Lynn's shaking her head, but it is shown stricken.
It was stricken by the P&Z.
Yeah, and this is not a plan, this is a plat, so access should not have, I don't agree that access should be associated with that at this point, but please do keep that in mind as it goes through DRC perspectives. So I move approval as stated in the packet.
Motion has been made by Alderman Dumas to approve the Five Apples final subdivision plat as proposed with 11 conditions as unanimously recommended by the Planning and Zoning Commission. Alderman Dumas, is that your motion?
It is.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Second by Alderman Parker. Alderman Dumas, you wish to speak on the merits?
I do not.
Alderman Sistrunk.
I do have some concerns about the Yellow Jacket Drive access, and I think this may be our only opportunity to include those concerns. I'm not sure that this is something that, short of a negotiation during the design review process, the board will have an opportunity to revisit. And I do think that striking that is going to contribute to traffic problems that already exist in that area. And I'd like to hear Mr. Kemp's take on how that does impact traffic.
Yeah, I just brought these concerns up during this applicant did what we call pre-application before, when they were just in the concept phase. Knowing the amount of traffic that South Montgomery exists in that area right now, it's around 12,000 vehicles per day. Yellow Jacket Drive gets somewhere in the neighborhood of 3,000 vehicles per day. That property is zoned commercial, C2, so it's unknown at this point exactly what's going to go in there. This process is essentially breaking that one piece up into two. But with the potential, it could be retail, it could be an apartment complex, it could be townhouses, just really unknown at this point. But with it being zoned of that, with the location that it is, it's probably going to be something that generates a lot So I made the recommendation during the pre-application meeting, as well as in this preliminary plat / final plat, that the applicants, it would be my recommendation to line up the driveways, because the western parcel would most likely have one access point, and I suggested it be across from Vine Street. The eastern parcel may have one on Montgomery, may not, depending on how that traffic flow. As you know, we also have a yield lane right there, and that could potentially cause some traffic issues. But I would propose, typically you want your access off of a minor street if it's on a corner, just from a traffic standpoint. And I would propose that the access for the eastern parcel be across from the Annabella entrance on Yellow Jacket. I made that recommendation to the developer and the other parties who were looking at purchasing the property. What we typically look at during final plats, you look at suitability of the land, you look at utilities, making sure that it has adequate service to the property, and I always try to look at access as well during the final plat. So that's why I brought it up. If the board feels like it's more appropriate in development review, we can certainly address it then. I think that the subdivision regs do spell out the requirement for that access component being in there.
Ms. Sistrunk, I was going to Edward, just kind of segue into that, but there's two sections in the code that would probably address that. The minimum design standards is actually Article 7, Section 17B, says that street intersections with center line offsets of less than 125 feet shall not be permitted. And then to go back to the definition of a street, because depending on the type of development that is proposed, there may or may not be publicly dedicated streets. And if you go back to the definition of streets, and this is from the definition section of the subdivision regs, streets and alleys is, the term street means a way for vehicular traffic, whether designated as a street, highway, thoroughfare, parkway, road, avenue, boulevard, land, place, or however otherwise designated. So that is a pretty big catch-all for just about any way that you access a property, whether it's a publicly dedicated road or otherwise. So staff feels that we have in the code existing, we have two pretty firm sections that we can lean on when we get to the development review section. And again, the Planning and Zoning Commission, and Mr. Latimer was there, there was a lot of discussion about it was important, but where exactly that needs to occur was a big question. So we have some guidance on that, and I believe we'll know how to move forward.
Alderman Vaughn.
Mr. Kemp, I see Vine Street on that. I'm already getting enough complaints about the traffic on Vine Street. What is he gonna do to Vine Street?
Well, essentially, Alderman, what I'm proposing is that the access to the eastern lot would be straight across from Vine Street. It's a pretty standard practice in traffic transportation engineering is you want your primary roadways to line up directly across from one another. If they are offset just a little bit, say 30 to 50 feet, you will have a lot more opportunities for vehicular conflicts. If they're lined up directly across from one another, you're able to substantially reduce the number of potential conflicts. I've recommended that the entrance to the eastern parcel line up with Vine Street, not be offset. Now, as Mr. Griffith indicated, if it wants to be offset to the east more than 125 feet, I think that would be a safer alternative. That 125 feet is another standard industry standard, I guess you should say, industry standard as far as offsetting the wood streets, private streets, public streets.
Well, they talk to the residents.
And just to clarify here, I'm in complete agreement that this needs to be a key issue, but when you look at the conditions, the other infrastructure conditions on here are substantiated by specific ordinances. So you have the sidewalk construction ordinance, you have others. Now, Ben, your comment about this being in the code from the subdivision side is something that I think gives perhaps some teeth to it, more so than just being a recommendation of staff, because it's actually in a code.
Yes, sir.
But my only concern with this, and the reason I said this, is those seem to me not plat issues when you talk about meets and bounds of a plat, as much as it does from a site planning perspective that's discussed at a DRC perspective, or timeline. And I mean, I completely agree that we need to look at controlled access for those very reasons right there, that Alderman Vaughn brings up.
Further discussion?
So am I hearing from Mr. Griffith and Mr. Kemp that you're comfortable with striking this recommendation and dealing with it at the design review session?
I'll speak and then you can chime in.
He's leaving, so he can be brutally honest.
If the board thinks this is important, I would suggest you leave that condition in there. I think it sends a message to the applicants that this is important to you guys from a traffic safety standpoint. Now, I think, that being said, we definitely have the legs to stand on the code as well when it comes to development. And if the applicant doesn't want to abide by that recommendation during development review, what's the appeal process? We'll come back.
That was
Or
a
the
good
Board of Adjustment.
non-answer answer, so.
The Board of Adjustment would be another avenue, Ms. Sistrunk, because of the dimension of the 125 feet, so that there's a couple of options that would be available at that point whenever it's appropriate.
So, I mean, the two options they have are line up with mine, or you've got to be 125 feet away.
To meet code, yes, sir.
I'm comfortable with that, if that's in our subdivision.
That's why I read it, right out of the book,
Right.
brought my book with me.
And Chris, just to clarify.
Mr. Griffin?
Yes, sir.
If I take it out, will it bring all the traffic? Or if I leave it in, which way? Which be best?
As far as
Bond Street.
Mr. Vaughn, I think a lot of that's gonna depend on the type of the development and how it's, how dense it's developed. I'm not a traffic engineer. Mr. Kent could probably address that a little more specifically than I could. But that's certainly something we would need to look at when a development proposal is brought in, and we'd have more information, and we'd have a better idea of how many units or what type of development proposal. It's R3, so more than likely it would be a medium, R3 is a medium density residential zoning.
I don't think traffic, there should be no influx or decrease in traffic. The issue is that from a safety perspective, if you're on Vine Street and you come out to Yellow Jacket, and if you've got an intersection straight ahead, a true four-way intersection is much safer than if the road is offset 50 feet to the left, because then you not only have to navigate the Yellow Jacket road, you have to then be looking out for the person coming out off of the developed piece of property. So it would be much safer from a Vine perspective for it to be included. I think I think it definitely needs to be done the way it's stated. My only issue is whether it's a plat condition or a DRC condition. And I have no problem whatsoever. Chris, from your standpoint, are you from a plat? I mean, we have the leverage from a plat process to add these conditions with the legal issues and
Yeah, I think this is a discretionary call as to what the board feels like is the best procedural mechanism to get across this public policy concern. I think from the code sections that Ben read, it provides the city staff with that discretion to put it on the plat if that's where they think is the best place to make that public policy concern known. I also think that cuts both ways. If the code's there, they can enforce it at DRC. So, I mean, the code's the key.
well, let me go back on something I've said, and I'll say where I'm right or wrong, and I'm wrong in this sense. I will amend my motion to restate item 6 of the plat as a standing condition for the final plat.
All right, without objection, Alderman Dumas has rescinded and restated his motion to be the approval of the 5 Apple subdivision plat as proposed with the 12 conditions as proposed by staff. And the distinction of that is it's the 12 conditions as originally proposed by staff as opposed to the 11 conditions as recommended by P&Z. Alderman Dumas, is that your motion?
It is.
or, excuse me, is there any objection to Alderman Dumas rescinding and restating? Any objection? Any objection? All right, motion is now as Alderman Dumas has restated. Discussion. Any discussion? Any discussion? Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, please signify by saying nay. Measure clearly passes. The next matter on the agenda is the consideration of the approval of P&Z item FP 12-06, Myrtle Creek.
Mr. Mayor, I move approval, giving a finding of fact of contextual change from R2 to R5 and a justified and stated public.
Not there yet.
Plat.
This is the last plat, number 4, Myrtle Creek.
I'm getting
And we got to have a public
excited
hearing
to
on
go
that
home.
one before you make motions.
Way home.
All right, do you have a motion as it relates to Myrtle Creek?
Yes, it in the minutes?
It's in the minute.
Yes, I move approval with the conditions stated.
Motion has been made by Alderman Dumas to approve the Myrtle Creek final plat, final subdivision plat as proposed with the 11 conditions as unanimously recommended by the Planning and Zoning Commission. Alderman Dumas, is that your motion?
It is.
Do I hear a second? Motion has been seconded by Alderman Parker. Alderman Dumas, do you wish to speak on the merits?
No.
Any discussion? Any discussion? Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, please signify by saying nay. Measure clearly passes. And that carries us to the consideration of the approval of item RZ 08-03. And this item does require a public hearing. We will proceed as follows. Mr. Griffith will introduce the matter, have an opportunity to hear any questions from the board on the introduction of the matter. Mr. McKee will have 15 minutes to present his case to the board. Anyone wishing to speak in opposition to Mr. McKee's request for rezone will have up to 3 minutes individually and collectively as a group up to 15 minutes. Mr. McKee, doesn't look like there's going to be a packed house, but should you wish to split your time and save any time to rebut anything that is said against your zoning proposal, you may do so. For instance, you could speak 10 minutes here on the other side, and then you could reserve 5 minutes should you so choose. Mr. Griffith?
Mayor and Board, item RZ08-03 is a request for a public hearing by Mr. George McKee to rezone property from R2 to R5 located at the rear to the west of 514 South Washington Street in Ward 7. The subject property is approximately 3/4 of an acre in size and located northwest of the intersection of Wood and Washington Streets behind the Piggly Wiggly grocery store to the northwest. The subject property is surrounded on 3 sides by property zoned R5, and the house at 514 South Washington Street is zoned R2. The applicant owns all the adjacent properties surrounding the subject property. A letter from the applicant is included with the staff report stating that he intends to develop additional units for the Brownsville Station apartment complex to the west. The properties to the north and west were rezoned to R5 in 1981, and the property to the south was rezoned to R5 in 1996. The applicant requested a rezoning in 2004, which included the subject property and the property located at 514 South Washington Street, and that request was denied. The applicant requested another rezoning in 2008, which the Planning and Zoning Commission recommended for approval, but the Board of Alderman denied. The applicant appealed the board denial, and the case has been remanded back to the board for a public hearing. 6 property owners of record within 160 feet of the subject property were notified directly by mail of the rezoning request. A public hearing notice was published in the Starkville Daily News on Friday, September 28, 2012, and a placard posted on the property. As of this date, the planning office has received no inquiries regarding the rezoning request. This is an advertised public hearing, so at this time I need to ask the mayor and alderman if any of them have received any communications from anyone regarding the request. I'll be happy to answer any questions the alderman may have, and Mr. McKee is here, and I believe he has a PowerPoint presentation to present.
He said no question from the residents at all.
No, sir, not one phone call, an email, nothing at all.
Alderman Sister.
I have a question for Mr. Latimer. I know that one of the things that we'll look at is a change in the neighborhood. What date do we use?
I looked at that today to see if a Supreme Court case or Mississippi Court of Appeals case touched on that issue. and they are silent on that issue. Therefore, I think the appropriate and conservative approach tonight is to look at change all the way up to today's hearing. After all, on appeal, the court did remand this back for a fresh and new hearing for Mr. McKee. And so I think that by far the safer legal ground would be to consider the change all the way up to this hearing date.
But do we look back to 2004, 2008, some date prior to that?
That is the board's discretion as to how far back you go under the law.
Okay.
Alderman Carver.
This is the property just north of the large house, right?
It's to the west of the large house. It's directly behind it.
And so everything other than the large house has already been rezoned to R5?
It has, the subject property and the White House, the large White House has not been, they're both still R2. And if I might add, the property is landlocked, so it's behind the house. On Wood Street, there's a thick hedgerow, and then there's the Brownsville Station Apartments to the west. We posted the placard kind of at, to the south, to the southwest of the property, which was about as close as we could get to posting the property where the placard would be visible from the road. And I would note that the placard is a courtesy notice that we post, the planning department posts as a, as a courtesy to the adjacent neighbors that are outside that 160-foot buffer that would not receive a notification letter in the mail.
Thank you.
So it's a little bit off, but it's the closest we could get where it'd be seen from the roadway.
Will the access be through Brownsville Station, or will the access be through?
Mr. McKee has indicated that he would continue the development of Brownsville Station and it's accessed through another point.
Any further questions or comments for Mr. Griffith? One last chance. This is last time to ask Mr. Griffith any questions. Any questions or comments?
Ben, good luck to you.
Thank you.
Job well done here. We appreciate it.
Thank you much.
Thanks, Ben.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. McKee, you have a total of 15 minutes. Do you wish to use it all at once, or do you wish to split it, reserving time for rebuttal?
Well, I'd rather split it because I know there may be some questions of me, if there are some other points made, so I'd like to be able to answer those questions.
Okay. How do you want to split it? 10-5,
10 and 5 would
12-3?
be fine.
All right. Clock 10.
Mr. McKee, how are you?
Fine, sir. How are you?
Doing good.
Come over and shake your hand.
Yes,
Hadn't
sir.
seen you in about
Yeah, it's been a while.
10 years.
Yeah, good to see you here.
I came yesterday. All right, there we go. I believe we can perhaps see this fine. Okay. Basically, this is about Brownsville Station Apartments, which are the apartments I own, Block 42 in Starkville. And I thought I'd give you a little opportunity to get acquainted with them. If I can bear with me just a minute. All right. This is the property in question, 0.75 acres. And this down here is Wood Street. This is Washington Street. And over here is Gillespie Street. These are our apartments, and they're all zoned R5. And our company owns the land here and here, which is already, that goes on to Washington Street, that's already zoned R5, and then right here is a house that is R2, and this is the 0.75 acres in question. And I think somebody, I believe it was Alderman Carver, had asked about access, and what has happened since 2008 when this first came up is our company has bought this piece of property. So beforehand, we only had the opportunity of access through the existing street to Brownsville Station, which goes along right about here. But now we also have an opportunity of access on Wood Street right here. So these are our apartment, a couple of pictures of our apartments. The property in question that we're talking about is over here behind these two buildings right here. And this is a picture of it I took yesterday of the property that we're actually talking about. And that over there is Wood Street. And then this over here is where the big old white house is. And then these are our apartments. And then this is a movie I took for you.
This is a movie of the Brownsville Station apartment complex.
So
We'll start over here with Cottage 4, A and B, and Cottage 5, looking down there. And then building 6, 7, 8, 9 in the corner there. May not be able to see it. And building 10 right there. Building 11. Building 12, 13, 14 in the corner, the two cottages. And crossing over the stream, buildings 15, 16, and 17 there behind the tree. 18, and then you have 19, 20, and 21 in the corner there, the three cottages. Then building 2, building 3, where the office is located at the bottom corner there. The rest.
And then again, all right. So basically a little bit of about what we are, who we rent to, and so forth. Over there on 110 Wood Street, we have 73 apartments and cottages. And up at 210 Wood Street, which is just down the street, we have 13 apartments and cottages.
That's coming off Louisville Street right there, right?
Excuse me?
That's coming off Louisville Street.
Coming off Louisville Street, and then on the left, there's actually two sections there.
Right.
Yes, sir. Mr. Bond. We have about 130 occupants in this location. Almost all of our occupants are Mississippi State students. We're racially diverse. We have our 2-bedroom apartments go for $760 a month for new rentals. We have a policy in place where if you've been with us up to 4 years, we don't raise the rent on it. So, but if you were to go and rent a new apartment, you'd have to pay $760. For 1 bedroom, it's $560. And we have 13 of those cottages. They go for $635. And so currently we're at 98% occupied. That's about a historical average over the last 10 years. We're an equal opportunity fair housing provider. We try to provide a safe, attractive, affordable place for our residents who are students primarily. We have a couple of faculty members. I emphasize the word safe. We also provide a free apartment to one of the City of Starkville policemen there, who is our courtesy officer. So we also support your city police department with a free apartment. So here's a couple of the pictures of our cottages. This, I want to just point out, this is Wood Street right here. And these over here are Starkville Housing Authority. And here's another picture of our property. I think you can see we try to keep a real neat property. And another interesting point to be made, it doesn't cost the city anything for maintenance on our streets or parking lot. We do all of that on our own. And here's a point I'd like to make. We're the closest apartment complex to Main Street. So, we're about a half a mile from Main Street, and a lot of those guys that we rent to, guys and gals, they spend their money right down here on Main Street. So, overall financial impact, we paid, the property in Block 42, which is Brownsville Station, paid $71,000, $817.28 this year. I don't know what it'll be next year. And our company's other property in Starkville paid $15,000. We had personal property taxes on our stuff like refrigerators and so forth. So our total property taxes paid in 2012 is $88,056 approximately. In addition, we support the city with electricity purchases of about $130,000 to $140,000 a year. I think that would be conservative. And water of approximately $12,000 to $15,000 a year. We also provide purchase all the other city services that other residents purchase. So our entryway is right over here on Wood Street, and it goes right down, right next to this little Hollis Creek right here.
1 minute.
Which is in a floodplain, but the ones that are in a floodplain, we buy flood insurance for. So we want to build inside the city limits. Others have built in the county, including Lakeside Place, the Links, Highland Plantation, the Point Campus Trails. Those are 5 major complexes, and they don't pay any city tax. So I would think, I'm just asking you, why wouldn't you think it's in the best interest of the city of Starkville and citizens to encourage a lawful expansion of what we believe is a very helpful tax payment? And so, with that,
Time's expired.
that is, okay,
That's it.
thank you.
All right, at this time, is there anyone wishing to speak in opposition to Mr. McKee's proposed rezoning? Anyone wishing to speak in opposition? Anyone wishing to speak in opposition? Seeing no one, Mr. McKee, you've still got 5 minutes.
I would certainly offer to answer any questions that you have.
Any questions or comments from the members of the board? Alderman Carver?
First, my comment to you is just thank you for, I know you're a reputable builder, and I think I know you've got my support for, I think this is comparable to what the other things you've got in the area. I don't see it being an issue from my standpoint. I've got no questions. I guess my question to the mayor and anybody on this board, is this something we can vote on tonight, or is this a time sensitive where we gotta wait so long?
No,
after?
it's eligible for a vote tonight.
Is it? Okay.
That's correct.
Correct.
Alderman Vaughn?
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to make a motion. I approve the rezoning of the request will be based on the change of condition in the area of the public need.
Alderman Vaughn has made a motion to approve of item RZ-08, or item RZ-08-03, a rezoning, the proposed rezoning of Mr. McKee's property based upon changing conditions in the neighborhood and public need.
Mayor, may I be recognized?
You may.
And Alderman Vaughn, when you make this motion, are you referring to the change in conditions as specified in Mr. Griffith's staff report and the public need statistics as specified in his staff report and the presentation made by Mr. McKee tonight?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Do I hear a second for Alderman Vaughn's motion?
Second.
Motion has been seconded by Alderman Perkins.
Correct.
Alderman Vaughn, do you wish to speak on the merits?
No, sir.
Any discussion? Any discussion? Any discussion? Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please signify by saying nay. Measure clearly passes. Thank you, Mr. McKee.
Yes,
Thank you, members of the Board of Alderman.
The next matter on the agenda is a request for approval of the fire department claims docket. We'll give Alderman Carver a moment to exit the room. Discussion. Move approval. Motion has been made by Alderman Dumas to approve of the City of Starkville claims docket for the fire department as of October 8th, 2012. Alderman Dumas, is that your motion?
Yes.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Motion has been seconded by Alderman Corey. Alderman Dumas, you wish to speak on the merits?
No.
Any discussion? Any discussion? Any discussion? Saying none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please signify by saying nay.
Nay.
All those in favor, please signify by raising your hand. All those opposed, please signify by raising your hand. By a vote of 4 in favor with 2 against, this measure passes. The next matter on the agenda, can somebody tap Alderman Carver? And as he is tapping him, the next matter on the agenda is... Move approval. Motion has been made by Alderman Dumas to approve of the City of Starkville claims docket for all departments except the fire department as of October 8th, 2012. Alderman Dumas, that's your motion?
Yes.
Do we hear a second?
Second.
Motion has been seconded by Alderman Sistrunk. Alderman Dumas, you speak on the merits.
No.
Any discussion? Any discussion? Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please signify by saying nay.
Nay.
All those in favor, please signify by raising your hand. All those opposed, please signify by raising your hand. By a vote of 4 in favor with 3 against, this measure passes. Getting awful close on these. Yes.
Mr. Mayor, thank you for the recognition. I meant to say something at the beginning of the meeting under the board comments. Ms. Spruill, I meant to mention this to you earlier. I just want to commend Mr. Kemp, Mr. Terry Kemp, for stand up, Mr. Kemp. You stand up for a minute. I'm going to tell you what he recognized. I read your article in one of the recent. left the book on my desk there, but it's one of the electrical books, and you had a very good piece there. And hopefully, your staff will read that. But it was well done. It was very impressive. I normally get those books that I don't, they don't really get my attention. But to just tell the board a little bit about the name of the book, just real briefly, and what the article was about. But it was a job well done. It got my attention. I read it with great interest from beginning to end. Yeah, just very briefly.
The TVPPA is all the distributors of regional magazines. It comes out quarterly. And this month, it actually featured on the principles and values of the organization. And I have a few comments to talk about customer trust. And that's kind of what we try to do here at Starkville. We're trying to share with them that. So 255 members in.
And it was well written too. I like that. It was well written. Thank you.
Mayor.
Yes. Alderman Sistrunk.
And I wanted to mention that I understand the reason for the nay votes on the claims docket, and it is difficult to vote on all the items there. It's difficult to be completely aware of each of those items. I do know that the Budget and Audit Committee has on their next committee meeting an agenda item to talk about ways that we can improve the communication, particularly with larger ticket items between the board and the Department of Finance.
Alderman Carter.
How much was in that claims docket? Monetary amount?
Total amount, yeah.
Total amount, $210,570.41.
Do we have a copy of that?
Yes.
Where?
In your board.
It's in your packet.
It came in that. Why is it an addition? Why is it a late addition to our agenda? I'm just wondering, it's listed on our agenda as a late addition.
I don't know that it was a late addition.
It's a change.
The revision, okay.
Off the consent agenda at Alderman Perkins' request. So it's the same claims docket, it just came off the consent agenda.
Okay, well, I may have voted wrong, and I thought it was a late addition.
There was nothing new in there.
Okay.
Further discussion? Actually, we're not really discussing anything. That exhausts our open session. A motion to go into closed session would be in order.
I've got one more last comment, Ben. I publicly want to say to Ben Griffith, too, I think what everybody has said tonight, just thank you for what you've done. Why you've been here 6 years. You moving to Illinois? There's a lot of snow up there.
I asked him if he packed his sweaters.
Yeah, we appreciate everything you've done.
And again, we've not done a good enough job tonight of saying that you have served during a time when we have transitioned to a more regulatory environment, and that's a difficult thing to serve during transition, and you have done with great grace, and we do appreciate that.
One more thing, I'd like to say that every time I think this board, as we were in our transition, and we asked you to take an extra hat, and you put it on and ran with it, and been impressed with that. So thank you.
We love Ben.
Ben, I'm gonna miss you because you and I used to I won't get a chance to ride around with you no more. So I'm gonna really miss you.
With that love fest over, I move that we move into closed session to determine the need for executive session.
Motion has been made by Alderman Sistrunk to go into a closed session to determine whether there is a need for an executive session. Alderman Sistrunk, is that your motion?
Yes.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Motion has been seconded by Alderman Vaughn. Alderman Sistrunk, do you wish to speak on the merits?
No, no.
Any discussion? Any discussion? Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please signify by saying nay. Measure clearly passes, and without objection, I'm going to move us into a brief recess to clear the room. Any objection? I will now ask the clerk to read the motions passed by the board.
Okay. Have a motion, approval to disperse $297,000 from a DOT multimodal grant upon final approval from bankruptcy court at closing, and to authorize the airport board to use airport funds in the amount of $3,652 for closing. I have a motion to authorize the settlement in MCCO versus Starkville as presented. Motion that was voted down, moved to authorize city staff, city attorney, and bond counsel to determine steps that are necessary to amend the existing TIF plan on the Cotton Mill project to an amount not to exceed 60% in a term of up to 30 years. A motion that did pass to accept the letter dated October 12th, 2012 from Chantel Wilson rescinding her resignation and allowing her to continue as an administrative assistant for the city of Starkville. And then a motion that was approved, to basically approve the termination of Walter Atterbury.
All right, at this time, a motion to adjourn is in order. Motion has been made by Alderman Parker to adjourn until November 6, 2012 at 501 at 101 East Lampkin Street, the City Hall courtroom. Alderman Parker, is that your motion? Do I hear a second?
Second.
Motion's been seconded by Alderman Dumas. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Oh,
Election day,
Not the 6th.
yeah, it is, and it won't be done. All right, can you rescind and restate to be a place to be determined?
That's what I was doing.
All right, without objection, Alderman Parker's motion is now adjourned until November 6, 2012 at 5:30 at a place to be determined.
Correct.
Do we hear a second? Motion's been seconded by Alderman Vaughn. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please signify by saying nay. Measure clearly passes. We stand in adjournment.
Thank you, Alderman Vaughn.